I stood in the sterile lobby holding supermarket flowers that cost $12, waiting for the moment my husband's white coat would finally end our poverty. But when Lucas approached, he did not look at me like family. He looked at me like a clerical error. He did not offer a hug. He shoved a thick envelope against my chest containing divorce papers and $40,000 of debt, just as his rich surgeon mistress stepped up to claim him. My name is Megan Hartley, and at 32 years old, I was standing in the glass-walled atrium of Ridgewell University Hospital with a bouquet of carnations that had cost me $12.99. I had forgotten to peel off the orange discount sticker. The air inside the lobby was aggressively climate-controlled, chilled to a temperature that kept bacteria dormant and poor people uncomfortable. I was there to surprise my husband on his first day as an attending physician, the day we had spent 4 years starving for. When Dr. Lucas Whitman walked through the double doors, flanked by a phalanx of residents in crisp new coats, he did not look like the man whose student loans I had paid by stacking pallets in a warehouse. His eyes swept the room, passed over the reception desk, and landed on me. There was no warmth, no recognition of our shared struggle. He stopped mid-stride. He looked at me the way a surgeon looks at a tumor that has unexpectedly metastasized during a routine procedure. He looked at me like I was a problem to be excised. He did not walk over to kiss me. Instead, he marched forward, gripped my elbow with bruised force, and steered me rapidly toward a secluded alcove near the service elevators. Before I could even lift the flowers, he jammed a thick manila envelope against my chest. "Take it," Lucas said, his voice dropping to a hiss. "It is already signed. I need you to sign your part and file it by Monday." I stared at the envelope, my fingers numb. "Lucas." "What is this?" "It is a divorce." "Megan." "Irreconcilable differences." "Also, there is a clause in there regarding the debts. Since the loans were taken out for household maintenance while I was studying, they are classified as voluntary spousal support. They remain yours." My breath hitched, creating a painful knot in my throat. "Mine, Lucas. I sold my car for your tuition. I work double shifts so you can eat organic. You can't just—" "Lucas," a silky voice cut through the air. I turned to see a woman who looked like she had been born in a sterile environment. Dr. Celeste Vaughn, the daughter of the hospital's largest donor and the star of the surgical wing, approached us. She wore scrubs that probably cost more than my wedding dress. She glanced at me, then at the cheap flowers, and finally offered me a pitying, tight-lipped smile reserved for difficult patients or incompetent staff. "Is this the administrative error you mentioned?" Celeste asked, placing a manicured hand on Lucas's forearm. Lucas didn't flinch. He leaned into her touch. "Handling it now. Go prep for the gala committee meeting. I will be there in 5 minutes." When she walked away, the click of her heels echoing on the marble, Lucas turned back to me with a face made of stone. "Look!" "Megan," he said, checking his new watch. "You were great for the grind. You were the perfect bridge to get me from point A to point B. But I am at point B now. I need a partner who understands the lifestyle of a surgeon. I need someone who fits the future. I am your wife," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I am the reason you are standing here. You were a resource," he corrected, his eyes dead, "and frankly, you are exhausted. Celeste is, well, she is the destination." He turned and walked away toward the elevators without looking back. I stood frozen near the janitor's cart. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, my vision blurring. It was a notification from our joint bank account app. "Alert account overdrawn." Immediately following that was an email confirmation. A personal loan for $15,000 had been disbursed into the account 3 minutes ago. The funds had already been transferred out to a generic holding company I did not recognize. I stumbled out of the hospital, the automatic doors hissing shut behind me like an airlock. The humidity of Briarhaven hit me, thick and suffocating. I climbed into my 10-year-old sedan, the upholstery smelling of stale coffee and the warehouse dust that clung to my clothes. He had not just left me. He had used my credit score one last time, draining every ounce of financial viability I had left before severing the limb. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the phone to dial. I called the only person who had ever looked at Lucas and seen a shark instead of a saint. Grandma Eleanor answered on the first ring. "Grandma," I choked out, the tears finally spilling over. He served me papers. In the lobby. There was a silence on the other end, heavy and electric. Grandma Eleanor did not ask if I was okay. She did not ask for details. "Do not go back to that apartment," she said, her voice hard and clear. "Do not pack a bag. Just drive. Drive to my house. Right now." I started the engine, the belt squealing in protest. As I pulled out of the parking lot, the bouquet of carnations rolled off the passenger seat and fell onto the dirty floor mat. I left them there. It was a fitting funeral for a marriage that had been dead long before I knew it was dying. 4 years ago, I handed the keys of my first car to a stranger in a Walmart parking lot for $3,000 in cash. I walked 2 miles home in the drizzling rain because Lucas needed the money to secure his enrollment seat for the fall semester. That was the day I stopped being a partner and started being a venture capital fund for a business that would eventually fire me, to keep a roof over our heads and his expensive textbooks on the desk. I took a second job. My life became a blur of logistical grayness. By day, I was a floor coordinator at Northgate Parcel Dynamics, shouting over the mechanical roar of conveyor belts and inhaling cardboard dust that settled deep in my lungs. By night, I stood behind the counter at Greystone Market, selling lottery tickets and menthol cigarettes to truckers until 2 a.m. My diet consisted of sodium-packed instant noodles and coffee that had gone cold hours ago. I lost 15 pounds, not from a gym membership, but because I simply forgot to eat. Lucas framed it as a temporary battle we were fighting together. He would sit me down at our wobbly kitchen table, holding my rough paper-cut hands in his soft, lotion-smooth ones. "It is just until I pass step 1. Megan," he would say, his eyes wide and earnest, then residency, then the big paycheck. "Think of this as an investment. We are building an empire." I believed him. I believed him so much that I signed my name on every dotted line he placed in front of me. Because Lucas had no credit history to speak of, everything had to be in my name. Apartment leases, utility bills, credit cards for his essential study materials and board exam fees. I signed until my hand cramped. I thought my signature was a vow of support. I did not realize it was a trapdoor. Then, the subtle upgrades began. While my winter coat grew threadbare and my hair was always tied back in a messy bun to hide the lack of styling, Lucas started to polish himself. He began coming home with $70 haircuts from a downtown salon. A new watch appeared on his wrist, sleek and heavy. He started wearing a cologne that smelled like sandalwood and money. "It is for the image. Megan," he insisted when I asked about the cost, his voice taking on a defensive edge. "In the hospital, perception is reality. I cannot look like a slob if I want the attendings to respect me. It is part of the job." The divide between us widened into a chasm. He started complaining about the scent of the warehouse on my skin, claiming it clung to the upholstery of the car. He stopped inviting me to grab drinks with his med school friends. "Maybe you should stay home tonight," he told me once, blocking the doorway as he adjusted his silk tie. "You look exhausted. And honestly, Megan, you would not understand the conversation. It is all medical jargon. You would just be bored." That was when the name Celeste Vaughn started slipping into his anecdotes. At first, she was just a mentor who offered great advice. Then she was a brilliant research partner who shared his passion for vascular surgery. Then she became a silence, a topic he navigated around with suspicious care. I should have seen the signs. I should have noticed when he changed the passcode on his phone and turned off the preview for his notifications. I should have screamed when his study groups started running until 3 in the morning on Tuesdays, but I was too tired. I was working 80 hours a week so he could play doctor. I was so busy keeping the ship afloat that I did not notice the captain had already boarded a yacht. "You are just paranoid," he would snap if I asked why his texts disappeared. "I am under immense pressure. Megan, do not add drama to my stress." I retreated. I made myself smaller to fit the space he left for me, which was rapidly shrinking to 0. As I drove toward Grandma Eleanor's house, the truth hit me harder than the divorce papers. Lucas had not just left me for a rich surgeon. He had erased me from his life systematically, layer by layer, over 4 years. He had made me invisible while I was standing right next to him, and the worst part was that I had financed my own erasure. I had paid for the very shoes he used to walk away from me. I sat in the driver's seat of my sedan, the engine idling rough, and stared at the glowing screen of my phone until my eyes burned. The email confirmation was simple, brutal, and terrifying. $15,000. The loan had been approved and the funds deposited into our joint checking account at 9 o'clock this morning. That was exactly 2 hours before Lucas handed me the divorce papers. My hands felt cold. The debit card for that account was in his wallet. It had been in his wallet for 3 years because he told me it was easier for him to track our household expenses that way. I had trusted him. I scrolled down to the electronic signature section of the loan document. The timestamp read 10:14 in the morning. I froze. At 10:14, I was not at a computer. I was standing in aisle 4 of the Northgate warehouse, wrestling with a pallet of dog food. I knew this because I had to log every single scan into the company system to get my hourly wage. There was a digital footprint of me being miles away from where this loan was signed. I could not be in 2 places at once. Panic began to claw at my throat. I navigated to my full credit report, ignoring the data overage warning. I needed to see everything. My thumb trembled as I scrolled past the student loans I knew about. Then I stopped. There was another personal loan from 6 months ago for $5,000. I stared at the digital copy of the contract. The signature was mine. It looped the G in Megan exactly the way I did, but the pressure looked too smooth, too mechanical, like someone had traced a ghost. "I never signed this," I whispered to the empty car. "I never saw this money." Why hadn't I seen the warning letters? I dug deeper into the bank profile settings. There it was. 2 months ago, the mailing address for all banking correspondence had been updated. It was no longer our apartment address. It was a private mailbox center on the other side of town. He had diverted the mail. He had blinded me so I wouldn't see the bleeding until the wound was fatal. A text message banner slid down from the top of my screen, interrupting my investigation. "Lucas, coming by at 7 to get my things. Do not make a scene." The neighbors talk. Rage flamed up in my chest, hot and blinding. I wanted to throw the car into reverse, drive back to the hospital, march into the surgical wing, and scream until security dragged me out. I wanted to show everyone who their golden boy really was. But then I saw Celeste's face in my mind. That pitying smile. If I went back there screaming about money, I would just be the hysterical, greedy ex-wife. I would play right into the narrative he had already written for me. I would look crazy. I put the car in gear and drove. I didn't go home. I went to the only place that felt safe, though my stomach was twisting in knots. When I walked into Grandma Eleanor's house, the smell of chamomile tea and old wood greeted me, usually a comfort that made my shoulders drop. But today, the atmosphere was different. The kitchen table, usually covered in a lace cloth and a bowl of fruit, was stripped bare. It was just a polished wood surface that looked like an interrogation desk. Grandma Eleanor stood by the stove. She did not open her arms to hug me. She did not offer me a cookie or ask if I was hungry. She looked at my tear-streaked face with a scary intensity. She walked to the high cupboard and pulled out a heavy, dark metal box and a tarnished silver key. She placed them on the table with a heavy thud. "Sit," she commanded, pointing to the wooden chair. I sat, my hands shaking on my lap. "Grandma, he took everything. He took out loans in my name." She didn't look surprised. She pushed the box toward me. Her eyes were sharp, devoid of pity but full of a terrifying resolve. "Listen to me, Megan," she said, her voice low and steady. "You think being left is rock bottom. No. Rock bottom is when you sign for things you never saw. I always thought you just worked in filing at the city library," I said, staring at the metal box. Grandma Eleanor sat down opposite me, her posture rigid. That was the cover story I gave the family so they would not ask for financial advice. For 35 years, I was a senior fraud auditor for the State Department of Finance. I spent my life catching men who thought they were smarter than the paper trail. My specialty was identifying signatures that had been lifted, dragged, and pasted. She clicked the lock open. The lid sprang back to reveal a chaotic pile of evidence that contradicted my entire life. There were glossy color prints of bank statements I had never seen. There were receipts for dinners at the Obsidian Room and Le Monde steakhouses where a single appetizer cost more than my weekly grocery budget. And right on top lay a silver USB drive with the date written in white correction fluid. "6 months ago," Grandma said, picking up the drive. "Lucas came here while you were working a double shift. He wanted me to co-sign a loan for a mandatory surgical leadership course. I told him no. I told him his numbers did not add up. He did not know I had my phone recording under a stack of napkins." She plugged the drive into her laptop and hit the space bar. Lucas's voice filled the kitchen, but it wasn't the voice I knew. It was stripped of all the soft, pleading tones he used with me. It was cold and arrogant. "Come on, Eleanor." "She is maxed out," the recording of Lucas said. "I cannot squeeze another dime out of her FICO score. Megan is. She is a resource. She is a credit score that breathes. I need this cash to bridge the gap until I secure the fellowship." "And what about your wife?" Grandma's recorded voice asked sharply. "She is the launch pad." Lucas scoffed. "She is not the rocket. Celeste Vaughn. Now that is a destination. Celeste is a landing spot." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I grabbed the edge of the table to keep from falling out of the chair. He called me a resource." "Wait," Grandma said. She clicked a new file. "This is from my doorbell camera. 5 minutes after he left that day. On the grainy video." Lucas stood on the front porch, phone pressed to his ear. He was laughing. "No, she won't suspect a thing. Megan never reads the fine print. I just put a piece of paper over the top half and tell her it is insurance, and she signs. If I put the papers in the right spot, she is basically an autograph machine." My vision went red. The humiliation was so hot it felt like my skin was peeling off. I stood up, knocking my chair back. "I am going to the hospital," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I had never felt before. "I am going to play this over the intercom. I am going to scream in his face until the security guards drag me out. I want everyone to know, sit down." Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. I froze. "You will do no such thing," she said, lowering her voice to a dangerous whisper. "If you go there screaming, you are just the crazy ex-wife. You give him the narrative he wants. You make it emotional." She slid a heavy, tarnished silver key across the table. It clanked against the wood. "This is for a safety deposit box at Hawthorne Trust. Unit 402, she said. "He thinks it is a secret. He thinks because it is under a shell company. I could not find it. He is wrong." I looked at the key, then at her. "What do we do?" "Revenge is not screaming," Grandma Eleanor said, her eyes hard as flint. "Revenge is putting the truth in the right place. We are going to execute a 3-point strike. First, the bank to file a formal fraud affidavit. Second, a lawyer to freeze marital assets. Third, the hospital ethics board." She pushed a pen toward me, right next to the pile of damning evidence. "Dry your face, Megan," she commanded. "Today you do not sign for divorce. Today you sign to open an investigation." The air inside Hawthorne Trust smelled of lemon polish and old money. When we walked in, the atmosphere shifted perceptibly. The branch manager, a man named Mr. Henderson, who wore a suit that cost more than my annual rent, did not look at Grandma Eleanor with the usual condescension reserved for the elderly. He straightened his tie and hurried over, his face pale. He knew exactly who she used to be. "Ms. Hartley," he said, his voice respectful. "We cleared the private viewing room as you requested. Unit 402 is ready. Inside the windowless room." The air was frigid. Eleanor laid the loan documents flat on the mahogany table. She pulled a jeweler's loop from her purse and hovered over the signature line of the $15,000 loan. "Look closely, Megan," she instructed. "Do you see the hesitation mark at the top of the M? And here, the ink flood at the tail of the N." I squinted through the glass. The lines looked shaky, slightly thicker at the curves. "A natural signature flows," she explained, her voice clinical. This was traced, or worse. It was a digital copy-paste job where the resolution did not quite match the document scaling. "It is a forgery, and a lazy one at that." She then slapped a printed spreadsheet onto the table. It was my work log from Northgate Parcel Dynamics. "Mr. Henderson," Eleanor said without looking up, "please note the timestamp on the loan execution. 10:14 in the morning. Now look at this scan log." At 10:14 in the morning, Megan was scanning a package with tracking number ending in 559. That scanner is hardwired to a facility 10 miles away from any computer capable of accessing this bank portal, unless my granddaughter has learned to bilk banks telepathically. She could not have signed this. "Mr. Henderson typed furiously on his secure terminal. He frowned, then adjusted his glasses. "I am checking the metadata on the digital signature packet," he muttered. "Okay, here is the origin IP address. It does not match your home Wi-Fi. It is..." "Wait." He turned the screen toward us. The signature originated from a secure internal network. The ISP is registered to Ridgewell University Medical Center. My stomach dropped. He did it from work. He signed my name to a $15,000 debt while he was on his rounds. "It is a felony," Mr. Henderson said, his face hardening. "I am flagging this immediately. We are freezing the disbursement. I am also placing a fraud alert on the joint checking account. No funds go in or out without biometric verification from both parties." 10 minutes later, I walked out of the bank clutching a thick folder of notarized affidavits and certified copies of the metadata logs. For the first time in years, the weight in my hands felt like armor instead of a burden. My signature belonged to me again. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Lucas. Lucas. I just got a notification from the bank. The card was declined at the gas station. Unlock it. Now. If you turn this into a legal battle, the Vaughn family will crush you. You are a warehouse worker. They own the city. I showed the screen to Grandma Eleanor. She read it once, her expression unchanging. She did not tell me to reply. Instead, she pulled out her own phone and dialed a number from memory. "Jordan," she said into the receiver. "It is Eleanor. I have a case. It involves marital fraud, identity theft, and a doctor who thinks he is God. Yes, I know you hate them. Be at your office in an hour." She hung up and started the car. I looked at the passenger seat. Yesterday, a bouquet of cheap, dying flowers had sat there, representing my pathetic hope for a marriage that never existed. Today, that space was occupied by a stack of legal documents thick enough to ruin a career. It was not pretty, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, so was I. The office of Klein and Mercer Advocacy was tucked into the brick-and-mortar ribcage of old Briarhaven, a neighborhood where the buildings still sweated the industrial history of the city. It did not have the plush carpets or the hushed atmosphere of the bank. It smelled of burnt coffee, laser printer toner, and aggressive litigation. Jordan Klein did not look like a shoulder to cry on. She was a woman in her 40s with a haircut sharp enough to draw blood and a suit that looked like it was made of steel wool. She did not offer me a glass of water. She pointed to a chair, listened to my story without blinking, and then immediately began dissecting my life on a yellow legal pad. "Stop crying," Jordan said, her voice flat and efficient. "Tears are for funerals. This is an autopsy. We are not dealing with a divorce here. Megan, we are looking at a 4-layer cake of criminal activity: identity theft, bank fraud, misappropriation of marital assets, and my personal favorite, unauthorized use of hospital resources to commit a felony." She spun her monitor around to show us the data she had already pulled. I ran the IP address from the bank metadata through a tracer. Jordan explained. The loan was signed electronically from a workstation in the Internal Research Library at Ridgewell. That is a secure network. To access it, he had to use his employee credentials. He used the hospital's internet to rob his wife while he was on the clock. I pulled my wrinkled work log out of my bag and smoothed it onto her desk. I have the other half of the timeline. At 10:14 in the morning, exactly when the signature was authorized, I was scanning a pallet of dog food. Here is the server log from Northgate. It tracks my scanner gun by the second. I was 10 miles away. Jordan looked at the log, then at me. A slow, predatory smile touched her lips. Granular data. I love it. This proves physical impossibility. You could not have signed that loan unless you have telekinetic powers. She turned back to her keyboard, typing with a violence that made the keys clatter like gunfire. "I am drafting 3 things right now," she said. First, a police report for identity theft. Second, an emergency motion to freeze all marital assets so he cannot hide that $40,000. And third, a formal letter of inquiry to the Ridgewell Hospital Office of Compliance regarding the misuse of their IT infrastructure. My phone buzzed on the desk, vibrating against the hard wood. I glanced at the screen and felt the blood drain from my face. It was an automated email. Subject reminder. The Surgical Excellence Gala. Tonight. I felt sick. I have to delete this. It is an invite to the donor gala tonight. My name is still on the guest list as his wife. He probably forgot to remove me. "Do not delete it," Grandma Eleanor said, her voice cutting through my shame. "I cannot go there," I whispered, my voice cracking. "He will be there with her. I will look pathetic." "No," Jordan said, stopping her typing. She looked at me with eyes that were cold and hard. "If you stay home, you are the victim hiding in the dark. If you go, you are a threat. You walk in there with your head up. You do not drink. You do not scream. You just let him see you. It is psychological warfare. It throws him off balance." I swallowed hard, the knot in my stomach tightening. "He is coming to the apartment first, to get his clothes." Jordan leaned forward. "Good. That is an opportunity. Briarhaven is a one-party consent jurisdiction for recording conversations in your own home. I want you to set up a recording device. Do not tell him you know about the fraud yet. Just let him talk. Let him justify the money. Let him dig his own grave." She handed me a printed stack of papers to sign retainer agreements, not loans. "Listen to me closely. Megan," Jordan said, her gaze locking onto mine. "When you speak to him, do not talk about Celeste. Do not talk about your broken heart or the 4 years you wasted. That makes it a domestic squabble. Talk about the money. Talk about the loans. Talk about the paperwork. Hospitals do not care about adultery. They do not care about morals. But they are terrified of liability. That is the only language they speak. And we are about to scream it in their faces." Lucas arrived at the apartment at exactly 7 o'clock. He did not look like a man in the middle of a divorce. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. He wore a light linen blazer and loafers that I knew cost more than my entire monthly salary at the warehouse. When he saw Grandma Eleanor sitting at the kitchen table, he hesitated in the doorway, his hand tightening on the brass knob. But the hesitation was brief. He smoothed his lapel and stepped inside with a smirk that made my stomach churn. "I did not know we were having a family reunion," Lucas said, leaving the door open behind him as if he could not wait to leave. "I am just here for my winter coats and the espresso machine. Make this quick." I stood by the counter, my phone placed face down on a stack of napkins, the voice recorder app running silently. I did not shout. I did not ask him how he could sleep at night. I looked him dead in the eye. I saw the notification. "Lucas," I said, my voice steady. "The loan for $15,000. The one deposited this morning." He didn't even blink. He walked past me into the living room and started pulling books off the shelves. "Consider it a severance package," he called out over his shoulder. "I have debts to clear before the fellowship starts. You keep the debt. I keep the future. It is fair?" "Fair," I followed him. "You forged my signature. You logged into a bank account you have not contributed a dime to in 4 years. He spun around, a stack of medical journals in his hands. "I need liquidity. Megan, Celeste, and I are going to the Amalfi Coast before the grind of the fellowship begins." "Do you expect me to go there with a maxed-out credit card I needed the cash flow?" "You stole it to go on vacation," I said, ensuring my voice was loud enough for the microphone. "I borrowed it to maintain a standard of living," he snapped. He tossed the books onto the sofa and took a step toward me, his eyes narrowing. He noticed my laptop open on the table, displaying the bank interface. He reached out to grab it. "I am closing that account right, Nun." Grandma Eleanor moved faster than I thought possible. She slammed her hand down on the laptop lid, missing his fingers by an inch. She stood up, blocking his path. "Touch that computer," Eleanor said, her voice low and dangerous. "And I will add assault to the list. Forgery is a felony, Lucas. In this state, it carries a prison sentence of up to 5 years. Lucas laughed, a harsh, barking sound. He stepped back, running a hand through his expensive haircut. His composure was cracking. "You people are pathetic," he sneered, looking from me to her. "You think a few signatures matter? I am a surgeon. I save lives. The world does not care about your little administrative rules." He turned his glare on me, his face twisting with contempt. "You were never a wife, Megan. You were a resource. You were just a credit score with a heartbeat, and now that I have a real partner, you are obsolete." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I stayed silent. I needed him to say more. Suddenly, his phone rang in his pocket. He pulled it out and, in his arrogance, put it on speaker as he glared at me. Lucas Celeste's voice filled the room, tinny and demanding. "Are the papers handled? We have a reservation at 8. Do not let her drag this out. It taints the Vaughn reputation if you are seen arguing with the help." Lucas smiled at the phone. "Almost done. She is just realizing her position." He hung up and looked at me with triumphant pity. "By the way, do not bother coming to the hospital to beg. I flagged your photo with security this afternoon. I told them you were unstable. If you step foot on the property, they will escort you out in handcuffs. You are done, Megan." I looked at the man I had loved for 6 years. I looked at the stranger who had used my body and my bank account as a stepping stone. I felt the tears prick my eyes, but they did not fall. I felt a cold calm wash over me. "I am not going to beg, Lucas," I said softly, "and I am not going to scream. I just wanted to hear you say it." "Say what?" he scoffed, picking up his pile of coats. "That I was just a credit score to you." I reached over and tapped the screen of my phone. "And that you forged the signature because you needed liquidity for a vacation." His face went slack. He dropped the coats. You recorded that you are in my house." "Lucas," I said, "and you just confessed to a felony." Grandma Eleanor reached over and tapped the play button. "You were just a credit score with a heartbeat." Lucas's voice played back, clear and undeniable. I looked at him, and for the first time, I did not see a doctor. I saw a defendant. "Get out," I whispered. He backed away, his face pale, the arrogance drained out of him like blood from a wound. He turned and fled the apartment, leaving his expensive coats on the floor. I listened to the door slam, and I knew the power in the room had finally shifted. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the prosecutor. The Larkspur Grand Hotel smelled of expensive lilies and old money. I walked into the ballroom wearing a navy blue dress that was 5 years old and had been dry cleaned so many times the fabric was starting to shine in the wrong places. I did not wear a revenge dress. I did not show skin to make him regret losing me. I dressed like a paralegal serving a subpoena. I dressed like a woman who had a folder of evidence waiting in the car, not a woman looking for a dance. I spotted them immediately. Lucas and Celeste stood in the center of the room, bathing in the light of the crystal chandeliers. Lucas threw his head back and laughed at something a donor said, swirling his champagne. He looked entirely at home in his tuxedo, having completely erased the memory of the man who used to eat expired tuna packets because we were waiting for my paycheck to clear. He was glowing with the specific confidence of a man who believes he has married into immunity. A hand grabbed my elbow and pulled me sharply behind a marble pillar. It was Harper Lyle, a former resident who used to borrow my phone charger in the waiting room when she was too broke to buy her own. "Megan," Harper whispered, her eyes darting around the room. "You need to leave. Right now. The Vaughns do not just have money. They control the board of directors. If you make a scene here, they will bury you under so much litigation you will never breathe again." "I am not here to make a scene, Harper," I said calmly. "I am just observing." I moved away from her, drifting closer to the VIP cordon. The noise of the string quartet covered my approach. I saw Celeste lean in close to a nervous-looking hospital administrator, her hand resting possessively on his lapel. "Make sure the old complaint file remains sealed," Celeste murmured, her voice low but clear. "If the audit touches those access logs, we have a problem." My pulse hammered in my ears. It was not just Lucas. The rot went all the way to the foundation. They were already covering tracks I hadn't even found yet. I tried to turn back, but Lucas stepped into my path. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed, like I was a stain on the carpet that the cleaning crew had missed. He reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out a thick wad of cash. He shoved it toward my chest. "Here." Lucas sneered, his voice loud enough for the nearby table to hear. "If you are this desperate for money, just take it. Go buy yourself a meal. You look like the help." He was baiting me. He wanted me to scream. He wanted the donors to see the crazy, money-hungry ex-wife attacking the brilliant young surgeon. Then Celeste glided to his side, her silk dress rustling like dry leaves. She looked at me with dead, shark-like eyes and smiled. "Oh, honey, do not be mean," she cooed, linking her arm through his. She was useful for the lower levels. Everyone needs a stepping stone. But the climb is finished. Megan, you can stop holding the ladder now. It is embarrassing. The room seemed to tilt. The cruelty was so precise, so rehearsed. But I didn't break. I didn't throw a drink. I looked at the cash in Lucas's hand, then at the diamond choker around Celeste's neck. "High roofs catch the strongest winds," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "The slide down is very fast." I turned and walked away before they could signal security to drag me out. I left them standing there, confused by my lack of explosion. I sat in my car in the valet lot, my hands gripping the steering wheel. My phone lit up on the passenger seat. It was a text from Jordan. "Jordan, the compliance office just called. They want an emergency meeting at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Also, the bank just flagged a massive transfer attempt from the joint account. We blocked it. We have them." I started the engine. This was no longer just a story about a cheating husband. This was a corrupt power structure scrambling to cover its tracks, and I had just stuck a knife right into the infection. The counterattack did not come with a lawyer's letterhead. It came through the dirty vents of my workplace. At 9 o'clock in the morning, my shift manager called me into his glass-walled office at Northgate Parcel Dynamics. He looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat as he turned his monitor toward me. "We received an anonymous tip sent to corporate HR," he said, avoiding my eyes. "It claims you are using company time to orchestrate an extortion scheme against a prominent local physician. They are threatening a lawsuit against Northgate for harassment if we do not handle our employee. I have to suspend you, Megan, without pay. Until this clears up." I walked out to the parking lot, my hands shaking. They were not just divorcing me. They were starving me out. I drove straight to Grandma Eleanor's, hoping for sanctuary, but the phone in her kitchen was ringing off the hook. She slammed the receiver down as I walked in. Her face was pale, but her eyes were burning with a cold fire. "That was a journalist from a tabloid blog," she spat out, "asking about my history of fabricating audits in 1998. They are trying to discredit me before I can even testify. They want to paint me as a senile liar. We have to stop," I said, panic rising in my throat. "Grandma, they are destroying us." "No," she slammed her hand on the table. "They are shooting because they are scared. If we were wrong, they would ignore us. They are panicking. Do not dodge, Megan." "Finish it." My phone buzzed with a message from a number I did not recognize. It was Harper Lyle, the resident from the gala. Harper talked to Rowan Pierce, head nurse on the surgical floor. She saw him using the admin terminal to alter his shift logs. She is scared, but she hates bullies. We raced to Jordan's office. Jordan did not waste time with pleasantries. She immediately pulled up a whistleblower protection affidavit. "Rowan is terrified of losing her pension," Jordan said, typing furiously. "But I can seal her identity until the moment of submission. If she swears she saw him logging into the system to sign those loans while claiming to be in surgery, we nail him on perjury and fraud simultaneously." Then came the notification that changed the timeline. The hospital compliance board sent a sterile email to Jordan. They were convening a closed ethics hearing tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. It was a rush job, designed to sweep the mess under the rug before the next fundraising cycle began on Monday. We had less than 24 hours. "They want a quick dismissal," Jordan said, her eyes narrowing. "They expect us to show up with tears and accusations of adultery. Instead, we are going to walk in there with a liability nuke. We spent the night building the binder. We organized the evidence not by emotion, but by cold, hard data. The IP address logs, the metadata timestamps, my warehouse scanning logs that proved I was 10 miles away, the audio recording of his confession, and finally, the signed affidavit from Rowan Pierce, which Jordan had secured an hour ago after a tense phone call. Just as the sun began to rise, Grandma Eleanor's phone chimed. She looked at the message, and a grim smile spread across her face. "It is from my contact at the state auditor's office," she whispered. "Celeste Vaughn." 2 years ago, she was flagged for abnormal administrative overrides on patient billing records. The file was sealed by the hospital board to prevent a scandal. It establishes a pattern. She taught him how to do it. I looked at the stack of papers in front of me. For years, Lucas had mocked my job at the warehouse. He had laughed at my obsession with scanning every barcode perfectly. But as I stared at the time-stamped logs of dog food pallets and instant noodles, I realized the irony. My boring, low-wage reality was the one thing he could not fake. He could forge a signature, but he could not forge the grind. "Let's go home and shower," I said, closing the heavy binder. "Tomorrow isn't a hearing. It is an execution." The conference room on the executive floor of Ridgewell University Hospital was designed to intimidate. It had a mahogany table long enough to land a plane on and windows that looked down on the city like a god watching an ant farm. The hospital legal team, the ethics board, and a representative from the major donor committee sat in silence. Lucas sat at the head of the table, looking confident and relaxed. Celeste sat 3 chairs away from him, creating a calculated physical distance that screamed liability management. Lucas opened his mouth and painted a picture of a saint married to a lunatic. My wife is... Well, she is struggling, Lucas said, using his best bedside manner voice. The divorce has triggered a financial panic in her. She willingly allowed me to sign those documents to consolidate our debts. But now she is rewriting history to extort a settlement. It is tragic, really. He looked at the board members with sad, puppy dog eyes. They nodded sympathetically. Then Jordan Klein stood up. She did not look sympathetic. She looked like a butcher. Let us look at the timeline, Jordan said, projecting a slide onto the wall. Dr. Whitman claims his wife signed this loan at 10:14 in the morning. Here is the digital metadata from the bank. The signature was executed from an IP address registered to this hospital's internal research library. She clicked a button. A new document appeared. And here is the employee log from Northgate Parcel Dynamics. At 10:14 in the morning, to the exact second, Megan Hartley was scanning a pallet of dog food 10 miles away. Unless Mrs. Hartley has the ability to be in two places at once. Dr. Whitman, you are lying. Lucas stiffened. The sympathy in the room evaporated. It was a misunderstanding of the time. Lucas stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. I had administrative approval to handle family finances during breaks. Celeste. Dr. Vaughn authorized my schedule adjustments. He turned to Celeste for help, grasping for a lifeline. Celeste did not offer a hand. She offered a knife. I was misled, Celeste said, her voice trembling with practiced fragility. I trust my team to handle their paperwork. If Dr. Whitman was using administrative overrides to commit fraud, I was as much a victim as anyone else. I was buried in paperwork. Lucas looked at her, stunned. You told me how to hide the logs. Jordan slammed another document onto the table. We have a sworn affidavit from head nurse Rowan Pierce, Jordan announced. She witnessed Dr. Whitman logging into the system using a stolen supervisor password to alter his shift records. She has provided the specific terminal ID and the time of the unauthorized access. The room went deadly silent. Lucas stood up, his face turning a blotchy red. This is hearsay, he shouted. You are taking the word of a warehouse worker and a nurse over a surgeon. I bring millions into this hospital. Grandma Eleanor stood up. She walked to the center of the room, placed the small silver USB drive on the polished wood, and looked at the board members. This is not hearsay, Eleanor said. This is his voice. She pressed play. The audio filled the acoustic perfection of the room. You were just a credit score with a heartbeat, followed by the undeniable sound of Lucas laughing. I forged the signature because I needed liquidity. The silence that followed was absolute. Lucas stared at the device as if it were a bomb. Then, panic took over. He lunged across the table, his hand clawing for the drive. Give me that, he screamed. 2 security guards moved instantly, restraining him by the arms. The board members recoiled, seeing not a brilliant doctor, but a desperate criminal. The head of the ethics committee did not even look at Lucas. He looked at the legal counsel. Suspend his privileges immediately, the chairman said, his voice dry. Escort him off the premises and hand this entire file to the district attorney, and open a full audit on Dr. Vaughn's department regarding these administrative overrides. If she facilitated this, I want to know. Celeste's face went white. Her immunity had just expired. As the guards dragged Lucas toward the door, he thrashed, looking back at me with wild eyes. Megan, he yelled. Megan, you cannot do this. I am your husband. I am your future. I stood up and looked him in the eye. I felt light, as if 4 years of gravity had just vanished. I am not a bridge, Lucas, I said, my voice clear and steady. And I am not a resource. I am the record. I turned my back on him and walked out of the room, listening to the heavy doors click shut on his career. I did not look back. The story ended there. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I really want to know where you guys are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Lucas's ending. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this victory with even more people.